There is an island off Japan where nobody has lived in 50 years. It once held more people per square mile than any place on Earth. Concrete towers stand empty, staircases collapsing, floors giving way to open air. The gates stayed shut for decades. Now, the gates are open 1 meter at a time. Off the coast of Venice, there is an island built from bodies. Plague victims went in by the thousand for centuries. Soil samples from Poveglia have come back with organic content that should not be there. A private lease controls the island today. Nobody sets foot on it. Under a town in Pennsylvania, a coal seam has been burning since 1962. It is still burning right now. Geologists estimate the fuel could last 250 more years. The town is gone. The fire is not. In the Chagos Archipelago, a government removed an entire population from an island by force. The International Court of Justice ruled the removal illegal in 2019. The base built on that island is still operating. This is our countdown of the 13 most forbidden places on Earth that even the governments that control them will not fully explain. Stay to the end, because number 1 is a monastic peninsula in Greece that has banned an entire category of visitor for over 1,000 years, and inside its walls sit manuscripts from the Byzantine Empire that almost nobody outside has ever read. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching this from. At number 13, Hashima Island, Nagasaki Prefecture, Japan. It was the most crowded place on the planet. Not a city, a rock. 15 acres off the coast of Nagasaki, mined for coal from 1887 until 1974. Mitsubishi built the operation up over decades, packing workers and their families onto a footprint barely larger than a few city blocks. At its peak in 1959, Hashima held over 5,000 people on those 15 acres. That works out to 216,000 people per square mile. Manhattan, by comparison, holds about 70,000 people per square mile today. Hashima beat it by a factor of 3. Apartment blocks rose 9 stories high, stacked so close that residents on lower floors barely saw daylight. The mine itself ran far below the seabed, with shafts extending over 600 meters underground at points, deeper than most offshore drilling operations built today. Workers descended by elevator into tunnels that ran beneath the ocean floor itself. Historical labor records reviewed as part of the 2015 UNESCO listing process confirmed that Korean and Chinese laborers were conscripted to work those tunnels during the Second World War. Some under conditions Japan formally acknowledged as forced labor. Mortality records from that period remain incomplete. There was a school, a hospital, a Buddhist temple, a Shinto shrine, all crammed onto the rock along with the mine shafts running beneath it. Concrete apartment block number 16, built in 1916, is often cited by architectural historians as one of the earliest large-scale reinforced concrete residential buildings in Japan, built specifically because wooden structures kept failing under typhoon winds on the exposed rock. Rooftop gardens were built on several buildings using imported soil, since there was no natural ground on the island left uncovered by concrete. Then the coal ran out. In 1974, Mitsubishi shut the mine down without much warning. Evacuation took weeks. People left furniture in the apartments. They left dishes in the sinks and calendars on the walls, some still showing the month they left. Within a generation, salt water and typhoons had started eating the concrete apart from the inside. A concrete seawall, built in stages starting in the 1930s, still rings most of the island's perimeter. It is the only structure keeping typhoon waves from finishing what the coal company started. UNESCO inscribed Hashima as a World Heritage Site in 2015, part of the sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution listing, alongside a formal acknowledgement of the forced wartime labor that had also taken place there. Nagasaki city engineers have surveyed the buildings repeatedly since inscription. Their conclusion has not changed. Interior floors are unsafe. Staircases fail without warning, sometimes with no visible sign of weakness beforehand. A narrow walkway now lets tour boats land visitors on a fenced perimeter path. Nothing more. The apartment blocks, the school, the hospital, all remain sealed behind barriers built to keep people out of a place built to hold more of them than anywhere on Earth. The population once outpaced Manhattan. Now the population is 0. At number 12, Poveglia Island, Venice Lagoon, Italy. They used it to keep the sick away from the healthy. 17 acres, a mile and a half from Venice, first used as a quarantine station in the 1700s during recurring outbreaks of plague sweeping through the lagoon. Ships suspected of carrying disease were diverted there before they ever reached the city. The sick were unloaded, treated when treatment existed, and buried when it did not. Some estimates place the plague dead interred on Poveglia above 160,000 people. That is close to the population of a mid-size American city, buried under 17 acres of a single small island. Records referenced by Venetian historians describe the island functioning as a quarantine outpost even earlier, as far back as 1348, during the first major wave of the Black Death to strike the region. In 1922, the island became a psychiatric hospital. It operated until 1968, run under practices that hospital-era records describe only in fragments. Venice's state archives hold plague-era quarantine logs. Italy's Ministry of Health holds the hospital's closure records. Neither institution has released detailed accounts of conditions inside the wards. What has surfaced from hospital administrative files is limited to staffing rosters and building maintenance requests, nothing describing patient treatment in any detail. Soil surveys taken from parts of the island have found unusually high organic content in certain burial layers, consistent with mass plague interments stretching back centuries. Local accounts describe farmers refusing to work parts of the land for generations, though that detail comes from oral tradition rather than any official record. Italian television crews attempting to film inside the old hospital in the early 2000s reported repeated equipment failures during shoots, a detail widely repeated in Italian press coverage, but never examined by any scientific body. In 2014, a private leaseholder purchased rights to the island at auction, outbidding several other parties who had proposed hotel and resort development. Under Italian law and the terms of that lease, the public cannot land there today. The hospital walls are still standing, the wards are still empty. At number 11, Centralia, Pennsylvania, USA, the ground has been on fire since 1962. An anthracite coal seam beneath the town ignited that year, reportedly from a trash fire that spread into an exposed vein near an old strip mine. It has burned continuously since, across roughly 400 acres underground and still expanding along the coal seam year by year. 400 acres is about 300 football fields, all of it smoldering beneath what used to be a town of over 1,000 people. Ground temperatures near vent cracks have measured above 500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt snow on contact and to kill vegetation directly above the fire's path. Smoke and sulfur fumes have risen from cracks in yards and roads for decades. Carbon monoxide readings taken by state inspectors in some locations exceeded safe exposure limits by several times, which was part of the justification for the eventual evacuation order. In 1981, a sinkhole opened beneath a 12-year-old boy in his own backyard, releasing a plume of hot gas from below. He survived by grabbing a tree root on the way down. The U.S. Bureau of Mines began serious gas monitoring soon after, and Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection has tracked the fire's underground spread ever since, using boreholes and temperature sensors across the affected area. In 1992, the state condemned the town under eminent domain, offering buyouts to remaining residents. Roughly 1,000 residents had already left voluntarily throughout the 1980s as the buyout program expanded. Route 61, which once ran directly through town, was permanently rerouted after sections of the old roadway buckled and cracked from heat, and that abandoned stretch has since become a minor tourist attraction, covered in graffiti. In 2002, the Postal Service revoked Centralia's zip code entirely. Most homes were demolished, streets ripped up, foundations left bare in overgrown fields. A handful of residents refused to leave and were allowed to stay for life under a legal settlement reached with the state in 2013. Geologists estimate the coal supply could sustain the fire for another 250 years. The town emptied out. The fire did not. At number 10, the Darvaza gas crater, Karakum Desert, Turkmenistan. Soviet engineers meant to burn it out in days. The crater sits in the Karakum Desert, 69 meters wide and 30 meters deep. 69 meters is roughly 2/3 the length of a football field. According to Turkmen accounts, Soviet geologists drilling for natural gas in 1971 hit a cavern that collapsed the drilling site, releasing methane into the open air in volumes nobody had anticipated. To stop the gas from poisoning the surrounding grazing land and nearby settlements, engineers set it alight, expecting the fuel to burn out within a week or two. It is still burning more than 50 years later. The Karakum Desert itself covers roughly 70% of Turkmenistan's total land area, and Darvaza sits near a settlement of only a few hundred people, most of whom were relocated by the government in 2004, citing health concerns tied to the crater's fumes. In 2013, Canadian explorer George Karunis descended into the crater in a heat-resistant suit, in an expedition backed by National Geographic, becoming the first person confirmed to reach the bottom. He confirmed active combustion across most of the crater floor and collected soil samples from the rim. Those samples showed microbial life surviving in conditions that should be lethal to most known organisms, a detail later cited in discussions of extremophile biology and, speculatively, in research on the limits of life in harsh planetary environments. For years, there was no fence and no barrier of any kind around the site. Tourists camped near the rim, and several were burned by wind-blown heat or by falling debris near the edge. In 2022, Turkmenistan's president publicly ordered the crater extinguished, citing health and environmental concerns and describing the flames as a waste of natural resources the country could otherwise export. No independent source has confirmed that the fire has actually gone out. At number 9, Bhangarh Fort, Rajasthan, India. There is a fort in India where the law itself sets a curfew. Built in the 17th century in Alwar district, Bhangarh's ruins stretch across a valley studded with temples, market colonnades, and the remains of a palace complex climbing the hillside above the town. The fort once housed a population estimated in local records at close to 10,000 people before it was abandoned sometime in the early 18th century, reportedly following a famine and a period of conflict in the region. The Archaeological Survey of India maintains signage at the site with an instruction that appears almost nowhere else in the country. Visitors may enter by day. Nobody may remain after sunset, and nobody may enter before sunrise. It is one of very few historical sites on Earth where a national government has codified an overnight ban tied to local legend rather than to any stated structural or safety concern. Local folklore, documented by Rajasthan's tourism department, attributes the rule to a curse laid on the fort by a holy man after a conflict involving the fort's final ruler and his court. The story has circulated in roughly the same form for generations, well before the Asai formalized any restriction, and versions of it appear in regional oral histories collected by Indian folklorists dating back over a century. The Asai has never issued an engineering report to justify the nighttime rule. No collapse risk has been documented. No wildlife hazard appears in any official record. Just the sign, and the sunset and the gate closing on schedule. Rangers do enforce it every single night, without exception. At number 8, Plum Island Animal Disease Center, New York, USA. For 70 years, a federal government would not tell its own neighbors what was happening on an island they could see from shore. Plum Island sits a mile and a half off Orient Point, Long Island. 840 acres in total. 840 acres is around 640 football fields. The United States Department of Agriculture opened a biocontainment laboratory there in 1954 to study livestock diseases, including foot and mouth disease, rinderpest, and African swine fever, under biosafety level 3 protocols. The facility was reportedly chosen in part because island isolation was considered a natural containment barrier against airborne spread to mainland livestock. Unauthorized entry has been treated as a federal offense since the lab's founding. The Government Accountability Office has audited the facility multiple times over the decades, flagging aging infrastructure and containment concerns in more than one report, including a 2003 review that found ventilation systems dating to the original 1950s construction still in use. In 1978, an internal investigation examined a documented containment breach involving foot and mouth virus that reportedly spread to cattle held on the island for research. Details of that investigation were only partially released to the public, and full incident reports remain restricted. For decades, officials in Connecticut and New York, whose coastlines sit within sight of the island, said they received minimal disclosure about which pathogens were being handled there at any given time. Oversight shifted from the USDA to the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, following post-9/11 restructuring of biosecurity facilities. Congress later approved construction of a replacement facility in Manhattan, Kansas, with research operations scheduled to fully relocate there. In 2023, DH began transitioning the Plum Island property towards sale, with conservation groups among the reported bidders for the land once research operations relocate. The ferry route runs past it daily. The fence has never moved. At number 7, North Sentinel Island, Andaman Islands, India. They have killed almost every outsider who has landed there in living memory. North Sentinel is 23 square miles of forest in India's Andaman chain, home to the Sentinelese, one of the last uncontacted peoples on Earth. The Anthropological Survey of India estimates their population somewhere between 50 and 200 people. Nobody knows the number precisely because nobody has completed sustained contact, and aerial surveys can only count visible figures on open beaches. Genetic and linguistic studies of neighboring Andamanese groups suggest the Sentinelese ancestors likely arrived in the region tens of thousands of years ago, potentially among the earliest human populations to reach South Asia. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose boat drifted too close to the shoreline were killed after their anchor failed overnight. In 2018, American missionary John Chow paid local fishermen to bring him near the island and was killed within a day of landing, according to accounts later given by the fishermen who witnessed the aftermath from a distance. Indian law bars approach within 3 nautical miles, enforced by Naval Patrol, under a restricted area order maintained by the Ministry of Home Affairs. India briefly relaxed restricted area permits for several other Andaman Islands in 2018 as part of a tourism initiative, but explicitly excluded North Sentinel from that change. Most restricted zones on this list exist to keep people out of danger, or to keep secrets in. This one exists to keep an entire people from being wiped out by diseases they have no immunity to, a risk demonstrated repeatedly among other Andamanese groups following historical contact with outsiders, including a well-documented collapse of the Great Andamanese population following British colonial contact in the 19th century. 23 square miles, roughly the size of Manhattan. Almost none of it has ever been mapped. The top 6 get stranger from here. A tunnel system under Moscow that no government has ever confirmed exists. A desert base in Australia ringed with radar dishes and silence. A monastic republic in Greece that has enforced the same ban for over 1,000 years. At number 6, Reactor 4, Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, Ukraine. Something under the reactor is still hot enough to kill. In 1986, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded and burned, releasing radioactive material across large parts of Europe over the following days. Estimates of the total radioactive release place it at roughly 400 times the radiation released by the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. A steel and concrete sarcophagus was built over the wreckage within months. Constructed under extreme time pressure and known from the start to be a temporary solution. In 2016, engineers slid a new confinement structure into place over that original shelter. It weighs 36,000 tons, stands 108 meters tall, spans 162 meters wide, and runs 257 meters long. It is large enough to enclose the Statue of Liberty, base and all, with room to spare. Beneath the structure, a mass of solidified radioactive material known as the corium, nicknamed the elephant's foot for its shape, remains so lethal that direct exposure near it in 1986 was fatal within minutes of contact. The International Atomic Energy Agency continues to monitor the site, tracking radiation levels and the stability of the material beneath the new arch. The exclusion zone surrounding the plant spans about 1,000 square miles, larger than the state of Rhode Island. Research published in the Journal of Environmental Radioactivity has documented something nobody expected when the zone was first sealed. Wolves, lynx, and elk now live inside it at higher densities than in comparable wildlife reserves nearby, even accounting for elevated radiation exposure in some individual animals. A separate study tracking wolf populations found levels roughly 7 times higher than in surrounding uncontaminated reserves. No permanent human population has returned to the zone. Certain interior chambers of the plants still admit no one but robots. At number 5, Metro 2, Moscow, Russia. A government has never confirmed it. Multiple defectors have described it in matching detail. Metro 2, sometimes called D6, is alleged to be a second subway system running beneath Moscow's public metro, built during the Soviet era for military and government use. Reported depths reach 200 meters, compared to the public system's typical range of 40 to 90 meters. Estimated total length runs past 150 kilometers, roughly the driving distance from Moscow to the city of Vladimir. Some accounts describe the system as connecting the Kremlin to Vnukovo Airport and to a bunker complex reportedly built for Soviet leadership in the event of nuclear war. The strongest documentary support comes from the Mitrokhin Archive, held at Churchill College, Cambridge, compiled from notes smuggled out of Russia by former KGB archivist Vasily Mitrokhin over more than a decade of covert copying. Historian Christopher Andrew worked with Mitrokhin to publish the material in The Sword and the Shield, cross-referencing details against other Soviet-era defector testimony collected separately by Western intelligence services. Independent researchers outside that project have pointed to satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar anomalies near known government buildings as further, though unofficial, corroboration. The Kremlin has never acknowledged the system exists in any public statement. It has also never issued a denial, a silence some researchers regard as notable given how directly the claims have been put to officials over the years, including in at least one parliamentary inquiry in the 1990s that received no substantive response. No independent team has ever been permitted to survey the tunnels directly. They remain, if they exist, exactly where the defectors said they were. At number 4, Pine Gap Joint Defense Facility, Northern Territory, Australia. 18 white domes sit in the desert outside Alice Springs. Nobody outside has ever been told what's inside most of them. Pine Gap occupies a restricted zone of about 4.5 square miles, roughly 2,900 football fields, 20 kilometers southwest of Alice Springs. It has operated as a joint United States and Australian signals intelligence station since 1970, staffed by personnel from both countries under a bilateral agreement periodically renewed and rarely discussed publicly in detail. Staffing levels are estimated at around 800 personnel, roughly evenly split between American and Australian nationals, though official figures are not published. Australia's Defence Special Undertakings Act makes unauthorized entry a criminal offence. No public tour has ever been offered in over 50 years of continuous operation. Journalist and researcher Desmond Ball of the Australian National University spent decades documenting the facility's likely functions using open-source satellite data, technical publications, and interviews with former personnel willing to speak in general terms. He published his findings through Anu Press in Pine Gap, testimony of a weapons systems engineer, and later through the Nautilus Institute in a series of policy papers, examining the base's role in missile defense and satellite communications intelligence, including its reported use in coordinating drone strike targeting data. Protesters have been arrested at the perimeter fence repeatedly since the 1980s, some receiving custodial sentences for trespass. Neither government has released a complete account of what is intercepted there, and successive Australian defense ministers have declined to answer direct parliamentary questions on the subject. The domes are visible from the highway. What is under them has never been. At number 3, Area 51, Nevada, USA. The United States government did not officially admit this place had a name until 2013. Formerly called Homey Airport, Groom Lake, the site sits within the Nevada Test and Training Range, covering roughly 92,000 acres. That is around 143 square miles, larger than the city of Chicago. It has been photographed by commercial satellites for years, discussed in film and television for decades, and treated by its own government until recently as though it did not exist on any map. The surrounding restricted airspace, sometimes called the box, adds several thousand additional square miles that civilian aircraft are barred from entering. In 2013, a CIA history titled The Central Intelligence Agency and Overhead Reconnaissance was released through a Freedom of Information Act request filed by the National Security Archive at George Washington University. That document was the first official confirmation of the base's name and its role in testing high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, including the U-2 and later the A-12 Oxcart program. Prior to that release, government responses to inquiries about the site had for decades been limited to a refusal to confirm or deny its existence, a standard legal formulation that itself became so associated with the site that it entered common use as a phrase. Perimeter security remains armed. Warning signs authorize the use of deadly force against trespassers, a posture rarely applied to domestic land anywhere else inside the United States. Unmarked vehicles reportedly patrol access roads leading toward the boundary, and several trespassers have reported being detained within minutes of crossing marked perimeter lines. A small settlement nearby, Rachel, Nevada, population under 100, has built its entire local economy around visitors drawn to the base's mystique, running diners and gift shops along the highway closest to the boundary. Current programs remain classified. The signs have not changed since the 2013 disclosure. At number 2, Diego Garcia, British Indian Ocean Territory. A government emptied an island of its people to build a base on top of them. Diego Garcia is an 11-square-mile coral atoll in the Chagos Archipelago, smaller than the island of Manhattan. Between 1968 and 1973, the United Kingdom forcibly removed the entire Chagosian population, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people, relocating most of them to Mauritius and the Seychelles to make way for a joint military base agreement with the United States. Many families were given only days of notice and were permitted to bring almost none of their belongings. Declassified Foreign Office cables held in the UK National Archives document the planning behind the removal, including internal correspondence describing the islanders in terms later condemned by British courts. Journalist and anthropologist David Vine detailed the operation in his book Island of Shame, published by Princeton University Press, drawing on interviews with displaced Chagosians and their descendants, many of whom settled in poverty in Mauritius with no compensation for years afterward. In 2019, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion finding the United Kingdom's continued control of the Chagos Islands unlawful under international law. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution the same year, backed by a vote of 116 countries, demanding the UK end its administration of the territory. Neither ruling changed anything on the ground. The base kept operating without interruption, and estimates place its capacity at supporting several thousand military personnel, along with long-range bomber and submarine operations. In 2008, the UK government admitted the island had been used to refuel flights connected to CIA rendition operations, a role it had previously denied and one never fully disclosed before that admission was made. No journalist has landed there freely since 1971. No former resident has been allowed to return and resettle permanently. At number 1, Mount Athos, Chalkidiki, Greece. One rule has held for over 1,000 years, and a modern government wrote a legal exception just to keep it standing. Mount Athos is a monastic peninsula of about 130 square miles, home to 20 Orthodox Christian monasteries operating under a self-governing charter that traces back to Byzantine imperial decrees dated to the year 972. That is over 1,050 years of continuous restriction. It predates the Norman conquest of England by roughly a century, and it predates the founding of Oxford University by more than 100 years as well. The core rule is called the Avaton: no woman and no female animal beyond a handful of narrow exceptions for farm use may set foot on the peninsula under any circumstance. It was codified under Byzantine rule, reaffirmed under Ottoman administration centuries later when the peninsula retained its self-governing status even under Ottoman control, and written directly into Article 105 of the modern Greek constitution. When Greece joined the European Union in 1981, the accession treaty carved out a specific exemption for Athos, rather than force the rule to change to match broader European law. Violators have been prosecuted repeatedly. Several cases in the 2000s and 2010s ended in criminal charges and short prison terms for women who entered disguised or by boat, including a widely reported 2008 case involving 2 women from Moldova. Roughly 2,000 monks live inside the peninsula's walls today, a figure confirmed through Athonite community records studied in the Journal of Modern Greek Studies, down from an estimated peak population of well over 10,000 monks in the medieval period. Their libraries hold manuscripts dating to the Byzantine period, including theological texts, imperial correspondence, and illuminated works that have never been fully cataloged by any outside institution. Access for outside scholars is granted rarely, and only after lengthy application through the Holy Community's own administration, with visiting permits for male scholars typically capped at a small number per day across the entire peninsula. The ban is older than most of the nations that surround it. The archives inside have barely been read. Concrete towers standing empty over the sea at Hashima, a quarantine island off Venice built from its own dead, a coal fire burning under an abandoned Pennsylvania town, a crater in the Karakum Desert still lit 50 years after the drill collapsed, a fort in Rajasthan sealed by law every night at sunset, a federal island a mile and a half from Long Island, gated for 70 years, a forest in the Andaman Sea where contact still means death, a steel arch over Chernobyl's reactor, built to outlast a danger nobody can fully measure, a tunnel system under Moscow no government will confirm or deny, 18 white domes in the Australian desert, watching, saying nothing. A runway in Nevada the United States denied existed until 2013. An atoll in the Indian Ocean where a court ruling changed nothing on the ground. A peninsula in Greece where the same rule has held since before England had a king named William. None of these places are secret because nobody has looked. They are restricted because someone decided, and never fully explained why, that looking was not allowed to go any further. Which one would you actually want to see for yourself? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay close.